Hello, everybody. Welcome to the fifth episode of the Alignment. This is the webinar for global products. In this episode, this is the fifth episode, we're going to be asking how you can unlock your next million users abroad. It is the widest lens that we've ever drawn. A lot of the previous ones have been slightly narrower topics, so we'll be wrestling with the subject a bit, and we've got some fantastic speakers to help us do it. We are just a little bit from us before we crack on. We're Global App Testing. We work with product globalization teams with some of the world's largest software businesses, and we help them understand their global user experiences. We're looking to take that acumen to a broader range of businesses to help different people solve their globalization and localization challenges. And obviously that involves telling you a little bit about what we do, but it also involves listening, which is part of the reason that we built the alignment in the way that we did. So we've got very short speeches at the start from our wonderful panelists, but most of the alignment is powered by audience questions and answers. So if you are in the audience, I would encourage you to post in the question box. And your question will get answered today, and our speakers will be delighted to answer. We want to hear from you, so please do that. You do it using the Q&A function. It's two chat bubbles next to each other, so it should be fairly straightforward what it is. And that is the format. That brings us on to our speakers. So we have five wonderful speakers here today. The first speaker, he's not actually first on this slide, but he is the first speaker, is James. James is my colleague. He's the Senior CS Manager at Global App Testing, and he works with some of the world's largest software businesses to help them achieve their global growth through testing. James is going to be conveying 3 quick tactics that you can use to drive adoption around the world in businesses that use an insight-first approach. I'm told it's going to be practical, so get out pens. We also have Natalie Kelly speaking second. Natalie needs no introduction, so I'll just say that for the first time I became aware of her was when a previous panelist name-checked her as the most useful guiding influence in helping to take HubSpot international. Now she's the Chief Growth Officer at Rebrandly and an author whose new book, Take Your Company Global, is out and available. We'll share a link in the chat that you can buy it from if you're so inclined. She's going to tell us about intensification and how that can help you unlock your next million users. Third, we've got Alessandra. Alessandra is a leading expert at globalization strategy, tech stack definition, and change management. She's worked in localization for nearly 20 years, and now she's the principal consultant of global sites testing. She's going to be telling us about the GeoFit, what that means, and how that can help you drive your next million users abroad. Fifth, we'll have Diego. Diego is a director of product management at MasterCard, where he leads on bank pay. He's going to be telling us all about local network effects and how they can unlock your next million users. And finally, last but not least, I have some questions for David McNamee about how tooling can support your next million users and drive the operational advantage, which creates global growth. So by the end of this, everybody on this call is going to have an additional million users, which I'm very excited about. I feel like I've been speaking for 100 years, so I'm going to hand straight over to James, our first speaker. Over to you, James.
Thanks, Adam, and great to be here, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're joining from in the world. Indeed, I'm James, and I'm a customer success manager here at Global App Testing. And as part of my role, as Adam's touched on, I have the privilege of working with some of the largest tech companies in the world, supporting some of the most advanced and sophisticated product teams with their localization and internationalization efforts, and indeed UX research to boot, to ultimately help deliver insights which inform product decision-making, hopefully from which those product decisions go on to drive millions of new users. As to why I'm here today, I know most of the audience for this webinar are localization people. So I wanted to pose 3 different frameworks that we can encourage our product teams to adopt, that from my experience will shift testing from kind of traditionally tail end processes, localization testing, QA testing, towards the use of testing and localization as tools to proactively and strategically drive user growth and unlock your next 1 million users. Three frameworks that my clients are leveraging day in and day out. The first is what we like to call cross-comparative testing. And this is part reactive in the sense that it's QA, but it's also part proactive. And essentially, cross-comparative testing is a data-led approach to understanding product commercial performance, identifying issues, and identifying actions to which your product team could take on post-launch for different user groups. And to break that down, how you do that, firstly, divide your product's performance data into different user groups, however that makes most sense, by country, by language, by region, and then compare each of those data sets and ask if your product is doing particularly well amongst one user group and maybe poorly amongst another. And then number three, and I think this is where we see a lot of our clients really embracing this as a good practice, run a blend of functional and UX testing in market for both your underperforming and high-performing markets to generate local insights, uncover localization issues that may be the cause for that underperformance. And as a fun fact, a tangent, way back, if people remember, Twitter increased their tweet character count from about 120 characters to 240 characters because they noticed superior performance of the app in Asian countries where the scripts are denser. An insight powered or uncovered by their product team's use of cross-comparative testing at that time. Number two, the next strategy I'll leave you with is to test intensively towards your desired market stage. What I mean by that, whilst many on here may already be investing in extensive localization testing across all your markets, it might be worth considering one market or a handful of markets to test intensively with. The reason for this approach is that when you think of a product having product advantage somewhere, it's often much more cost effective, much cheaper to retain a monopoly than it is to create a foothold in a whole new market elsewhere. And often, not only does each additional % of market growth have an exponential impact or effect on your ability to hold that market, likewise, your product actions in a particular area may also have an exponential return on your local market penetration. So as a strategic tool for localization leaders, test intensively, repeatedly, proactively in your key markets to generate those crucial validated local insights. And using those to drive iterative product adjustments, be it corrections, be it enhancements, towards your desired market stage can be a real needle mover to unlocking users. And finally, for me today, my third idea, my third thought is to run local market pulse checks. And a pulse check for us is, again, a tool. It's a tool specifically, however, for generating quick snapshots of localized feedback into user experience, preferences, attitudes, behaviors, pain points, through the use of unmoderated surveys conducted remotely, importantly with local participants on the ground in your target markets and demographics. And the first time we started work on pulse checks, our clients were looking for a way of systemizing local UX research in a way that would fit into traditional software development life cycles. So crucially, therefore, pulse checks are rapid, right? They're intended to be quick and fast, which means they can be proactively run and empower you with actionable, validated local insights, for example, on product ideas, mock-ups, prototypes, hypotheses you're looking to validate at any point in that product lifecycle. Again, pulling localization efforts away from tail-end processes in my head, and enabling localization teams to really elevate the voice of their global users within the product organization proactively to inform design decision making when it ultimately matters most, and to hopefully maximize your chances of unlocking your next 1 million users. Three thoughts from me, just to round up. Very happy to expand on any of these and any questions. Adam, back to you.
Thank you very much, James. And do ask questions using the Q&A function. As they pop into your mind, they can be really specific to the talks, or they can be just a general question and curiosity about a challenge you have when you are delivering your next million users. But I'm not going to hog the mic. I'm going to hand straight over to Natalie who is going to be talking a little bit about intensification and how that can unlock your next million users. Over to you, Natalie.
Thank you, Adam. I really love that I'm following James because I love the frameworks that he gave us. And the one that really grabbed my attention the most was this notion of intensive versus extensive. Because in my new book, Take Your Company Global, I'm actually talking about intensification. And you might be asking, well, how is that going to help me unlock the next million users? Well, under the new rules of international expansion, a lot of things have changed, and now it's easier than ever to be instantly available when your business model and how you go to market is global by default. So if we're talking about launching an app in a global app marketplace, or we're talking about launching something on a marketplace like Amazon, suddenly it's the marketplace itself that is global. And so your product is by default global from the moment you launch it to the world. So when you're born global and you're going to market in a global way to begin with, you don't need to think about entering a market. Instead, you need to think about intensifying your presence in a given market. And what I love about what James mentioned about the pulse checks and, cross-comparative QA is this enables you to actually figure out where you might have opportunity and to lean into those markets versus doing the same thing for every single market, because that is really, really important, especially I think in the wave of a lot of things that have happened post-pandemic, where companies are reevaluating the need for profitability, the need to make really smart decisions with their investments. Now, instead of saying, oh, let's just launch this in all markets at once, we can think about how do we make those adjustments that are really, truly mission critical for the specific markets where we see the most opportunity and perhaps the most signals from a given market, from those users in that market. So I think that aligns very nicely with what I talk about in the book. So I'm really grateful, James, that you brought that up. I think, to think about your next million users abroad, you do need to realize that each of these markets has truly different needs and preferences. So the sooner you begin to do that local market research, the better. And the big thing that I talk about in the book and that I'm talking about a lot lately is the fact that users derive value differently depending on what market they're in. And I think that's really important because we tend to design a product with a bias toward our home market. And often the people designing it don't even realize that they're doing that. They just think, oh, I'm designing for the use case that's familiar to me because I'm talking to these users. They tend to be in your own language, in your own market by default. And so I think one of the ways that you can fix that and diversify your perception of user value is to talk to users in more markets, but also to actually change who you hire on your own team. Because if you hire people who have familiarity with those markets and a more diverse team to begin with, they're going to automatically be thinking about it from a more diverse perspective. So that's something that I wanted to highlight in terms of unlocking the next million users. I think a lot of it starts with the composition of your team and the types of customers that you're talking to ensure that we don't have that implicit bias and proximity bias that we all naturally have and need to fight against. So one of the things that I wanted to mention is how we are applying this at Rebrandly. So Rebrandly is a link management company, and we have tools in our platform that enable link shortening, but also branded links, deep linking for those of you who are involved in apps, messaging, deliverability enhancements because of the fact that branded links are more likely to get through to people. So our platform enables that, but also branded links get higher click-through rates, whether it's deep linking or specific actions within an app. We also have tools that I think are really cool to enable you to display with just one link different information depending on the user's country, the user's device that they're on, depending on the time zone that they're in, all of these things that enhance the local deliverability aspect. And I think that's really key as we think about unlocking our next million users. It's not just, how do we reach any million users randomly in any part of the world? It's how do we grow in markets that are good for our business? And how do we make sure that we have a relevant customer experience, that we're delivering content and messages and information that matters to them in a way that they can derive value. And so I'm, I'm not in the localization industry directly now, but the platform that I enjoy working on every day with my product team and all of our teams here at Rebrandly is very tied to this mission of helping our customers unlock more users. So I think a lot of it has to do with intensification. A lot of it picks up on the themes that James already shared and the frameworks that he shared. So I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Very much, Natalie. Super, super interesting. I'm going to pass straight on to Alessandra. Really excited for this one. Alessandra, how can the right GeoFit unlock our next million users? Over to you.
Well, thank you, Adam. And thanks also, James and Natalie. I think, I'm going to kind of reiterate some of the points that you made. Of course, the fact that in the digital age, it is much easier for companies to go global much faster and more easily, which of course means that our consumers have a lot more choice, right? There's, it's not you're not the only company who can go global easier and faster, but everybody else can as well. So local customers have a really wide choice of brands, both global brands, but obviously let's not forget about local brands. And local brands have a huge competitive advantage, and that is knowing your customers really well, knowing the market, knowing the services in the market that are important to your customers. So the competition is really fierce out there. So in this, to thrive in this really diverse landscape, it's critical that companies embrace this concept of understanding the customer really well, understanding the local market, but also at the personal level, understanding the local customer and what they value. So moving away from being understood, which was kind of the old way of thinking where, I would just translate my product and marketing to another language, and then I would earn trust and loyalty from customers. That is no longer the case. Digital users are much more demanding these days, so they expect great experiences and personalized experiences. So one size will not fit all anymore. So I wanted to actually be super, super practical now and just talk about three really basic GeoFit principle, but fundamental to really unlock. If we're talking about 1 million customers, it's a lot of customers. So I want to, talk about some major blockers that we should basically stay away from. The first principle is simply be inclusive. Make sure that your product and services are easy to access. And I'm going to actually show you some very quick examples of what I mean here. So as we said, the other thing about digital users now is that they're really impatient. So they don't stick around and wait. If they find any blocker along the way, they are going to your competitor and possibly never come back. So access is key. Next up is offer local services. So make it easy to use. There are lots of local service techs that are offered to users. Make sure you include that in your product offering. And then finally, empathy. Make sure that your brand and your products are easy for the local user to relate to. So let's look at the first example on access. And here we're looking at the sign up and login page of the ASICS fitness app Runkeeper. And this is the screen for a Japanese market. And as you can see, there's a green button there for Line. And Line is very popular, if not the most popular messaging app in Japan, and Japanese users are very used to seeing this green button on any app sign up and login. So it really is important that you offer the same ease of access like a local company as well. And now let's look at the next ease of use. And here we're going to look at payments. You're going to like this one, Diego. So payments are a huge gateway to earn the trust and also the transaction from your local customers. Pinnacle is a sports betting site, online sports betting site, and online sports betting sites are almost exclusively offer their products in global markets. They don't really operate in in domestic markets. So they're really mature with payment methods. So they offer a wider range of payment options depending on the currency of the local market. So that's key. Another important local service to offer is, of course, shipping and delivery options. This is a startup in Italy, Shippy Pro. They offer shipping software. This is a B2B business. So we're not only talking about B2C, but here they offer merchants a wide array of different shipping couriers depending on the market. So that, in their e-commerce activities, the merchants can offer, whatever they need to their customers. And then let's end with empathy and how to relate. And we're going back to ASICS here. ASICS has developed a large global community of what they call ASICS front runners. These are running aficionados and experts in market. So there's members in about 30 different countries. There's about 500 ambassadors. They communicate in their own language. They write blogs, they do product reviews running on their terrain in the local market, and they participate in local events. So again, 3 quick ways, super basic, but if you want to take a big dent and a bite out of that million users, you need to make sure that these things are in place.
Thank you so much, Alessandra. Super interesting. And I don't think basic at all. I mean, often basic to understand is not the same as basic to deliver on, unfortunately. Anyway, I'm going to hand over to Diego now. Diego, how can using network effects drive our next million users?
Wow. Fantastic presentation. Thanks, guys. So let me start saying that I see the product as an instrument made of UX, feature sets, and value proposition. And this instrument is used in a way to address the unmet needs of target customers in a given market, in correlation to our colleagues, it was being said recently. Like any other instrument, if you don't use it properly, it won't perform as you would expect. When a product creates sufficient value to use at critical mass, means the product has reached like sustainable growth and profitability. That's what we call product market fit, or simply you master how to use your instrument. There are many ways you can attract new users to reach product market fit. The great majority put their thinking on A, monetary subsidies, classic 3-month subscription for free. B, the killer product feature, that one that gives the whoa effect on us. Good example was when Uber previewed the cost of your ride, right, when they launched the app. It was very innovative at the time. However, these can be challenging, right? If you take into account that you do need deep pockets since you are paying for new users. B, new users are likely not to stick around when you stop funding them. C, design a killer feature can be as hard as starting a viral campaign. And plus, a competitor could come up with something better next release, right? And this could be aggravated, right? If you're starting from zero, meaning that you have no user base at all. And you're looking for a way to bring 2 user groups to interact to drive growth, like Uber, again, riders and drivers, creating the classic discussion about the chicken and egg debating product. Should we bring riders first or drivers, and what we should do? So, hey, don't panic, right? There is a way to address this. So let me bring you to the MasterCard, right, as an example. For each new merchant accepting a MasterCard card, more value is created to MasterCard cardholders, since it is a new place for cardholders to buy from, and of course, it works the other way around as well for merchants, like more people can buy from them. This is what we call the network effect. The value grows as the number of users increases, right? For you to benefit from the network effect like MasterCard, your business model needs to be able to operate in a way that connects two or more user groups, buyers and sellers, drivers and riders, and you are facilitating transactions between them. The good news is that this is likely to be the case for you, since the great majority of digital businesses today follows this premise by default, thanks to the internet gods. So what I'd like you to consider is to apply this concept by leveraging an existing network as a way to sustainably grow your use base, combined with the approaches like killer feature, or money subsidies, or using sequencing. That could be your secret sauce to quickly reach critical mass. Here you guys can see on this slide is a showcase of 3 use cases from successful business that apply the network effect. The first one, MasterCard, partnered with a local card network called MADA in Saudi Arabia. The outcome, plus 25 million new users for MasterCard network. So every time they go abroad, they use their card, it goes through the MasterCard network. The second one, good example of monetary subsidies, Disney Plus owners. Disney Plus is an American video on demand where leverage the use space from O2, a mobile provider in UK, giving you the classic 3 months for free subscription. Because of that approach, Disney is taking in several markets. In 2022, Disney Plus has overtaken the number of subscribers from Netflix, who had the first move advantage, right? Last but not least, Uber Eats, good example of user sequencing and monetary subsidies. As we know, Uber started as a ride-hailing services provider and then decided to leverage the existing networks of riders and drivers to attract merchants to a new service called Uber Eats, becoming a new player in the food delivery business. To add on top of that, they also provide credit to users to try out Uber Eats as well, which is a great experience as well. The outcome in 2022, Uber Eats reached almost 11 billion in revenue. So wrapping up, don't restrict your thinking to conventional approach only to new product features or fund the user adoption. If you want to grow your product take, whatever market you are, think about local networks. Think about tapping into networks of existing use base as a way that combining with the 3 approaches I mentioned before to master your instrument and of course, unlocking your new next million users. That's me.
Thank you so much, Diego. That was great. Finally, I've got, just before I do ask David some questions. So thank you, Russell, for asking your question. We will get around to it. We've only had 1 question so far. If you have questions for the panelists, do pile into the Q&A. I do have some questions myself, but yours are much better than mine. So please do, if you want to know anything at all, just jump right in and we'll come round to it. It's a pleasure now to introduce David McNamee. David is an enterprise solutions architect at Phrase. Phrase is a powerful TMS system. I have a couple of questions for David. Hello there, David, first of all.
Hello.
How are you doing? The first question I'd love to ask you, obviously, Phrase is tooling, right? And is there to support processes. What do you think is the role of tooling in supporting the next million users growth?
I mean, the role of tooling, whether it's our use cases we've been talking about today or any kind of situation, you bring a tool to do things to have an advantage, to do it more quickly, to do it more cost effectively, to do it at better quality than you have previously. And those are the things that we focus on in our localization suite, is to do the automation, to bring to bear the new tools that are coming to market in the AI spaces, and to automate the decision-making process so that you can focus on how you're going to get the 1 million users, as opposed to spending the bulk of your time on the operational activity of actually doing the localization to be able to reach these 1 million users.
You mentioned AI. So obviously you're shipping LLM features that are involved in translation. Can you just spell out how you get from that operational advantage through to a commercial advantage that it could confer, that would actually help businesses reach their next million users? Is it a kind of zero-sum game with competitors that you're kind of outdoing them? What's the actual way that it would get you your next million users?
At the end of the day, it's about providing quality. AI is a major focus for our organization. We're ramping up our teams. We're ramping out the features that are being impacted by AI. But at the end of it, everything that goes in that's driven by AI is in some way trying to make the translations that are created better. Whether it's quality assurance testing that's being automated because LLMs are an interesting judge of translation quality. They can help raise red flags more effectively, or in some cases, they may do a slightly better job than traditional machine translation tools that have been previously brought to bear. And there are other use cases that our teams are investigating on where you use AI, LLM-driven AI particularly, that can assist professional translators to help them with their job, because the professional translators aren't going to go away. That's not going to happen, but they do need to scale. They need to have better tooling that helps them work faster, cost effectively, and provide better quality at the end of the day. So that's the focus. If you can provide those higher quality translations, then you can achieve some of the things that Alessandro was mentioning around that local touch, that local experience. Some of that comes through cultural knowledge of your professional translators, your reviewers, and your project designers. But if the language has a head start because of the tooling that's helping you, more is the better, the more that you're going to be able to achieve.
A lot of the time, particularly with sort of teams that have a formal localization department, I think the mindset is like, you're or they are hired in order to get a process ready for scale. And at some point we're going to, set the bonfire alight and do all of that growth, and we'll have a process that is scale ready. First of all, do you agree with that? But the real question is, what does a scale ready business look like to you? What does a business that is ready for huge growth look like?
From a localization perspective, I think that means that you know the process that you're going to execute. For one, you mentioned that, but you also understand the outcomes that you're expecting, and you know how to measure that effectively, and you can quickly identify exceptions. You have this wonderfully designed process. I've been delivering technology solutions for almost 30 years now. You sit down, you have a wonderfully designed process. It looks great on paper. You start to do it in real life, the world comes to get you very quickly. There are going to be exceptions. So being able to manage those exceptions, understand that they're going to happen, and have a plan for addressing that. Some of those exceptions can be through automation, but being able to identify, these are the ones where we have to have human intervention, and how are we going to keep humans in the loop, not only for handling problems that come up, but also assuring that quality stays at or improves, preferably, over time as we're using these tools.
Super interesting. Thank you so much. I've got so many more questions to ask you, but what I want to quickly do now is I want to get the slides out of the way, and then we can make it a bit more of a human conversation. So just a few notices to go through this week. First thing is, we've got a couple of things coming up in our calendar for the forthcoming alignment localization events. We've got one that is open to sign up to right now. That is on the 8th of November. It is starring Tucker Johnson, who's the co-founder of Nimdzi Insights. He's amazing. It's going to be all about delivering localization, which has a really high return, which I think is kind of relevant to what we've been hearing today. Other thing, just to mention in passing, if you are in the UK, or if you are going to be in the UK on the 19th of October, check your emails. We'll be sending you an email tomorrow about a live event that is happening here. If you're passing through, you actually won't get an email because we don't know your plans, but just drop me a line and we can see what we can't sort out. It is our very first alignment event happening here in London. The final thing to mention is that we have an ongoing exclusive offer that is available to attendees of the alignment. That is that we enable you to do a free test. One of the different strategies that James was describing will kind of fit into this. It is an exploratory test. We have testers around the world. This is a great opportunity because we can't, we don't always allow ourselves to offer this. We do take on cost, so it's a great thing to try. If you fill out the form, it's currently being entered into the chat by my colleague, I should think. And and we see if we can't get you, just kind of figure out how it works and check out what a functional or localization test looks like with global app testing. And those are all my notices. I've got a cool, it's like, let's go to light speed. It's kind of slide transition here. Hope you're all amused by that. But that means that I can just shut down the sharing screen. I think it's been super interesting. One of the things that I think is the most interesting, one of the themes, is basically the kind of process of decision making by which we identify what strategy to get your next million users is the best one, or where to focus. As Natalie says, we're all live everywhere in the world by dint of having a website, if we do have a website. So with that as an accepted fact, and accepting that, you can invest in localization or marketing or whatever it is to a different extent in different markets, how do you deal with that from a decision standpoint? How do you think, this is the market, or this is the process that I'm going to spend my time in investing in? Are there green lights that help you guys as leaders make that kind of decision, or that would encourage you to recommend a certain thing to a CEO in terms of identifying what markets you should be investing in? Is it that you should do something evenly across everything, or is it that you should invest your kind of time and effort to localize in a single one? Does anyone want to come in on that question first of all? Natalie.
I have a lot to say on this. In fact, I have a chapter on it in my book. So I think it's a lot more complex than often we think. And so often what I've seen companies do is over rely on the market pull signals. So they might see things that, these users seem to be exhibiting this behavior, and it gets very exciting. And so they think, let's lean into this market. But what's really, really important is to think through the end-to-end customer experience, which I know is incredibly complex and getting more complex by the day when people can access digital experiences in so many different ways through so many channels. But I've seen this happen where people think, oh, this is a good market. Look at the adoption, look at the monetization rate, look at, these signals and these metrics. But when you take a step back, sometimes the company itself is not even ready. So they start to go down this path and they get all excited and they invest more resources because look at how we're growing users and look at how we're growing these top of funnel metrics. But then when it gets to, we don't actually have the ability to accept their payment types. We're seeing a high, we're seeing collections problems in this market, or we're seeing actually there's more fraud, and there's all these different issues that are not usually thought through up front. And so I believe it's really, really important to have those conversations earlier. And so, not to overhype the book here, but I do have some questions that you can ask to think through these in advance. Like, do we even have the ability to offer local currency? Do we even have the ability to support a typical B2B payment type in Brazil that's only in Brazil, and things like this that a lot of companies don't even know about when they just add Brazilian Portuguese in the UI. Like, they're not thinking through, how are people going to pay? How are we going to collect payment? Do we owe local taxes? Does that change our tax structure? There's so many things to think through. So I am trying really hard in the book to get people to connect the dots on all the downstream impact before they overinvest in a way that is going to create a lot of buzz and anticipation that they can't actually deliver on. So that's my take.
Just to understand, sorry, I do want to ask everybody else that question, but just to understand what you said, you're kind of agreeing with James on the intensive, extensive thing, that actually you're better off thinking intensively about a whole product experience in a market rather than just starting to kind of translate out into multiple things. That's what you'd recommend in general.
Yeah, I mean, those cues are important too, right? So I am a fan, like sometimes you can't help it. Like if you're launching in multiple markets and you don't have many choices about, let's say you're required to launch in these markets, even if it's in one language due to the platform that you're on or whatever, sometimes that's very valuable initial feedback that you need in order to decide where to intensify. So I'm not trying to say to companies you need to do all the research up front and know every detail before you even get started, because I do believe there's power in learning, testing, iterating, and I don't want to prohibit people from doing that. But I also think once you have some initial data, don't just read those signals alone and make your decisions based on just that information. Once you have enough data, maybe then use that to look at the other aspects of the customer experience. So I'm actually codifying that in my book with some questions, but also a framework that people can use to make better investment decisions that relate to the business goals, but also that take into account the complexity of going into a market where you don't have experience, and maybe picking markets that are more aligned initially so you can get the learning and get that muscle going to where maybe you add one payment type, or you add one currency, or maybe you just add a payment type and not a currency to start to target, a market that's like seems to be of a similar opportunity, similar addressability, same language, or maybe it's a different language, but the currency is the same. There's all these different variations. But in the book, I do have a framework for that. It's called the Maraca model, and it has 3 components: market availability, customer addressability, which is what we're talking about here, and then real-time analytics, which is what I believe we get often on the product side. That I caution you want to capture those metrics and analytics, but you don't want to over rely on them without thinking about addressability. So now I'll shut up.
Can I get anybody else's view on that same question? So you're sat with the CEO. The CEO is saying, I want our next million users abroad. What should I do? How do you make that decision? What are the components of it?
I mean, obviously, Natalie covered a lot of ground there already. And data is, the key here. As much data as you can look at, of course, there's usually a lot of data even in your existing user base. As we talked about before, companies now are global without even knowing it. So they usually do have a user base of a certain market that they didn't even realize they had. So maybe start from there. But then, yes, of course, look at all the different elements that, beyond just the user data that you may have. I would just add more than, I add to what Natalie said. And looking at local competitors can be really insightful as well, because maybe, if they are, for example, in the payment area, if they are offering certain payments, if they are offering certain payment terms, for example, if it's a B2B business, for example, in some countries, they're just really long payment terms, and maybe your company's not ready to deal with that. So looking at the local offer, I think can also help. And then sometimes it's just pure culture. And I'll give you an example. So once again, at ASICS, ASICS acquired this fitness app called Runkeeper, and Runkeeper became ASICS Digital. So we offered Runkeeper, of course, to the Japanese market, and ASICS is a Japanese company. So we figured, the Japanese market is like, ours, just even by having the brand. And we really struggled in Japan for a long, long time. And it was just how we were, marketing to users, how our product was. And as we started looking at the data, we realized that our Japanese users were much more serious runners. They wanted, while in the US and in other markets, it was more recreational type of runners that were using the app. But in Japan, people wanted to train for marathons. People wanted marketing that, helped them, maybe in a loyalty program, gain points to get to, really higher level type of running expertise. So it is sometimes data in regulations, payments, etc., and sometimes it's just good old user insights.
Very good. Well, I'd love to turn the question on its head then. And instead of asking what's the thing that we can do right to generate the next million users, to look at common pitfalls and where some of the people in this webinar think what are common traps that people come into about thinking how do I get my next million users abroad? What are common mistakes that businesses make? It'd be interesting to hear if some of you had one of those you wanted to volunteer.
I can start on that
I
one.
think on the translations, we talk for hours about translation fails.
Sorry, you both came in on there at there was a technology lag there, but David, if you want to answer first, then I'll come to Diego.
Apologize for that. Yeah, I'd say on the translation side, we can all talk for hours about translation fails. I think being presumptive about the portability of your own language is a huge pitfall. Being a company in a location that uses one of the major, we'll call them global languages, English, French, Spanish, it's very easy to assume that, yes, I will be understood. The things that we put into market will be understood perfectly, and not really appreciating the cultural weight that language can bring and impact the experience. So that's always something that we talk about is you're using English. Which English? How many Englishes? You're using Spanish. Which Spanish? How many Spanishes? I live in Florida. I probably need 3 Spanishes, in the course of a week. So it's some of those kind of discussions that we want to have to make sure that the language is really correct.
Diego, what were you going to say there?
Yeah, no problem at all. I think fantastically, it's been really touched by our colleagues, right? If you're talking about in terms, for example, e-commerce, right, or in payment methods, is really understand, can I support this payment method? What is the local competitor I have now? And if you don't take that into account, right, you're probably going to miss something and you're going to regret it. The other thing as well is that investment, right? Due diligence, it's very important because it's going to require lots of investment, if you want to expand abroad, right? And you need to know exactly or good indication of how much you're going to need it for how long. So have a solid business case. It's very important as well, right? Taking that into account, which summarizes pretty much what you're trying to achieve. What is the landscape, right? What is happening there, right? Is it something that I really want to fund, and what are the scenarios in the best and worst case scenario, right? So then I need to know exactly when I need to pull the plug if I have to.
When you and this isn't just to you, but
Yeah.
to everybody. So you plan good and worst case scenarios. You start investment. How do you identify what is a good case scenario? I mean, presumably you can't just expect people to adopt your product at the same rates that they would in your domestic market when you launch abroad, right? Yeah. So it's this great unknown. You've no idea how successful you're going to be. How do you think about those business targets in a way that they have any meaning?
Oh, it's a very good question. Depends of the business, depends of your margins and so on. Lots of factors, right? But primarily, what we normally do is think about a market test plan, right? So what are the key indicators? What are the key elements that I need to take into account, right, to help me to get into the overall discussion I had about the product market fit, right? Which is where I can get indications that I'm finding a way of growth that is sustainable. That is not something that I'm funding myself, right? That independently is going to work, and then of course lead to profitability. If I don't have any indication in terms of a user retention, for example, it's a good indicator as well. Probably I'm not in the right path, and I need to reconsider either pivoting or perhaps kill it, which is another important thing to do as a product person as well.
Does anybody else want to come in on that? How you think about setting targets when you start to globalize your business and your product? Can't tempt anybody out on that one? No? Okay.
I'll add something real quick on that. I think it's just super important to align the product strategy and the geo strategy with corporate strategy. So, it's really tricky, a lot of the things we're talking about, because we want to go local and be nuanced at the local level, but at the same time we want to align with like the broader company strategy. And interestingly, in my time working at a large public company, sometimes I found that some element of our corporate strategy was something I could kind of hook my international wagon to. It's like the topic du jour, for example. Maybe we were trying to grow certain area of the business, and I saw, oh, we have fewer local competitors in this market for that. It's a ripe opportunity for us to focus that effort there. That would give me kind of the ability to do more of an intensification for that market while fueling the overall company goal. So the more you can kind of balance those two things, the easier it is to set targets and get, importantly, resources and funding to support those initiatives. So I know that's kind of, a big topic, but I wanted to add that in to the discussion in case it's helpful.
Yes, and also all of these are they're obviously enormous topics. So I'm aware that this is the content that is the most difficult to wrestle with of all the ones we've done in that sense.
But if you give us more time, we'll come up with answers. So my 2 cents on this one actually is that, and we've used this sometimes when choosing like the next language or to go with, is look at similar, if it's not your first international market you're going in, look at similar markets and look at the journey there and the trend there, and maybe try to align to those metrics, right? So I don't know, if you're already in Poland and you're decided to, or you're considering Czech Republic, for example, then, you may look at those markets. They may be similar for a lot of different reasons. So that can give you a good benchmark, at least, for what your progression should be in that market.
I have a question here that was asked on the entry form. So presumably the person who asked it is here with us. They ask, what advice would you give from somebody wanting to go from being a localization manager to in a growth-focused position? There are things that we know, including things like market reach and localization needs. How would I maneuver myself into a position where I'm actually feeling like I'm driving growth and known in the company for being somebody who's driving growth?
I have some thoughts on this since
Yes.
I have growth in my title. I think the most important thing is to start building relationships with people who are in those roles, like sales, marketing, understanding the way they think about these problems, and really listening. I think a lot of times if you have a localization role, you spend so much time trying to explain what you do and trying to get people to understand what it is that you do, that sometimes we're bad about not listening enough and trying to learn and absorb from what the other side is. And I constantly am saying to folks, like, try to not use the L word when you're talking to somebody who's in sales or marketing, because they're instantly going to put up barriers and not want to listen because it's foreign and unfamiliar to them. So try instead to use their terminology. Ironically, we're so good at adapting for a locale, but we need to adapt our internal language sometimes to really speak the language of growth professionals and speak the language of marketers and speak the language of sales. And we don't often take the time to learn those new languages. And we're so concerned with like making sure they understand what we're talking about. So that's kind of my push for anybody in localization. Treat it like you're learning a new culture, a new language, which we are very good at. That's a strength we can lean into as we try to understand the world of growth, product-led growth, as well as sales, marketing. They're all different disciplines, but they're all connected. And so ask questions, listen, and learn, and that instantly will help you build trust with those folks. And then you can talk about localization someday when they, ask more. That's my advice.
Did you put up your hand?
Yeah, we'll avoid the technology collisions. I think, tacking on to what Natalie said about communicating, learning to communicate in data the way that your organization communicates in data. It's very valuable to understand the right words to say, the right phrasing to use when you're building these relationships, but also to be able to present the data of this is what happens when you localize. This is the expense. This is the time it takes. This is the impact that it has, and be able to tie that to the things that your business measures and your leadership especially thinks about on a daily basis. If you're driven by key performance indicators, if you're driven by particular metrics that are less formal, learn how to tie onto those, and maybe even learn how to become a data source that influences those KPIs. That can really make you invaluable and lead to some new doors opening.
Very good. I actually really want to ask more about that, but I do want to make sure that we get to Russell's question because we're coming close to the formal end of the webinar. So Russell, and I think he did ask before Diego started talking. Some of what we've spoken about has been very B2C focused. Are there things that in parallel that work specifically for B2B? Is this just a less important thing for B2B to think in these terms? I don't know whether anyone wants to comment on that and address the question.
I can take, and Natalie, you can chip in. So it's funny to see that, because MasterCard is not a B2C company. It's a B2B2C company, right? And our customers are primarily banks or financial institutions, right? Which have the consumers or the merchants that we service for, right? Good example is like you cannot choose to have a MasterCard card, right? So it's defined by the bank that you bank with. So therefore, having that in mind, Russell, everything I said about the network effect or product market fit, everything that comes from that can be applicable to the B2B or to B2B2C flows as well. So I'll stop here and hand over to Natalie. Yeah.
It's funny, Diego, I was going to say something similar. I've only worked in B2B SaaS now for the past, 10 plus years. So I'm really thinking from a B2B perspective most of the time, but again, it's B2B2C. In the case of Rebrandly, most of our customers are using our tools to reach their end customers. And so I have a similar thought, but I think a lot of it is the same. And I actually think some of the best companies that are really, really good at adapting their experiences are B2C brands, because they have, a lot of times are more, they have a lot more local competitors, and it's kind of what Alessandra was talking about earlier about digital experiences, having more local competition and everything. A lot of B2C brands have always had that. And so a lot of times they are competing very locally from the very beginning. And so especially consumer products and food and beverage and a lot of these. So I look to B2C actually for a lot of inspiration and a lot of examples many times. But I think a lot of the best practices are coming from that space and kind of rolling into B2B. And now B2B companies are actually being forced to think more like B2C because of some of the trends that Alessandra touched on earlier. So that's my take.
Good. So it's 5:30. So I know that people will be starting to drop off, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I have one final question, and we'll wrap up the webinar with this. But it just tacks on to what David was talking about before, and I know obviously Diego was talking a little bit at the start of his bit about product market fit. I'm just kind of curious about how what data mix people in this room have used or recommended to understand that they've really got that, or to understand that maybe something's wrong with the way that their product experience is working abroad. What is the information source that you guys have relied on? Is there something that you found particularly important to help you make those decisions? How do you get it fast enough back home? What do we think?
I'll give a couple. Customer satisfaction and NPS, but you have to be careful because how those are used by country will vary. And I realize Alessandra had something to say, so I'm gonna let her talk.
No, that's fine. I was gonna say basically aligned to your business data, you know, KPI, what they're looking for success. And usually it is the kind of data points that Natalie talked about. And it's funny you mentioned NPS country by country, because in Japan, it's really bizarre how they consider NPS. I talked about it with Adam before, but yeah, I would say align with your company's KPIs. That's how you can show success more easily, especially if you're trying to maneuver into growth.
Fantastic. Well, with that, thank you very much, everybody. That was episode 5 of the alignment. Thank you, everybody, for staying with us through that. And we will obviously be back on the 8th of November talking about high ROI localization. So when you've got limited resources, high ROI localization is the thing to do. I look forward to seeing everybody there. But with that, I will bid everybody adieu and end the webinar. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.